Ever think about Bitcoin being like more than just money?
Yeah.
Like what if it's actually a key to kind of like a bloodless revolution?
Yeah.
Where we ditch those coercive systems, not through violence or anything, but by just like shifting the incentives.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, that's what we're diving into today, right? We're
Okay.
unpacking this conversation between Robert Breedlove and
Yeah.
Max Borders.
Yeah, the Underthrow guy.
Exactly, the mind behind the book Underthrow.
Yeah. And this isn't just like some pie in the sky theory, Borders gets into like the nitty-gritty of power, like how it actually works, tracing its roots all the way back through history.
Yeah.
For someone like you, interested in systems, thinking this is key. Like to change a system, you got to know how it was built.
Right. So where does he start? Like cavemen with clubs?
Not quite. So he actually uses this example of early farmers, right? Think about it. For like ages, wealth was this diffuse thing, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then we've got agriculture, we've got surplus crops. Suddenly you're a sitting duck. Oh, I see, because now you have something to lose.
Right.
Like someone can actually take something from you.
Bingo. And according to Borders, this vulnerability, this idea that you have something to lose, is what actually birthed the very first protection rackets. ICA, like the early state.
Like the OG mafia.
Right. It wasn't so much about, like, benevolent rulers, It was about farmers facing this really tough choice. Pay up for protection or risk losing it all.
Okay. But monopolies, always mean, worse service and higher prices, right?
Right.
So why would the state as a business be any different?
That's the crux, right? That's the question.
Yeah.
And I think Lord Acton said it best. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This isn't just ancient history, though, right?
Right.
We see this power grab play out again and again.
Yeah, like it's a tale as old as time.
Exactly.
So how do we escape this loop?
Right.
Is that where Bitcoin comes in?
That's where things get really interesting.
Imagine those early farmers, right?
Yeah.
With like a time machine and a Bitcoin wallet. Suddenly, the state's protection doesn't look so essential, right?
No, not so much, because they have a way to secure their wealth outside of the system.
Exactly.
It's like, don't need your permission slip vibes.
So it's like, take this permission slip and, yeah. It's like a modern Exodus story.
Oh, wow.
Remember the Israelites fleeing Egypt?
Yeah.
Bitcoin offers a similar escape. Like, it's a path to financial sovereignty.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. But, like, how does Bitcoin actually do that? How does it make those pharaohs sweat a bit, so to speak?
It's twofold.
Okay.
First, Bitcoin raises the cost of predation, trying to seize Bitcoin. That's like trying to catch smoke.
What?
Theft, inflation, government seizures, they all get a whole lot harder with Bitcoin.
So it takes away the tools of the bully, basically.
Exactly. You got it.
But you said twofold.
Right. On the flip side, it lowers the cost of cooperation. Bitcoin transactions, they're seamless, trust minimized. Suddenly, you don't need those pharaohs, dictating the terms of trade. It fosters this incredible network of voluntary exchange globally.
It's like a global community.
Exactly. And it's all built on this shared technology.
So by its very nature, just by using it, Bitcoin kind of nudges us towards a different way of interacting with each other.
I think so.
Less reliant on force, more on mutual benefit, right?
Exactly. It's what Breedlove and Borders call the moral substrate of technology.
Moral substrate.
Yeah, the idea that tech isn't neutral. Bitcoin, in a sense, embodies those values of transparency, individual agency, voluntary interaction.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it's powerful.
It's baking in the values that we want to see in the world, one transaction at a time.
Right? I like that.
But doesn't that sound a bit idealistic? Can tech really change human nature that much?
That's where the conversation takes this fascinating turn. They start talking about the decline of traditional religion, particularly in the U.S.
Hold on, religion. What's that got to do with, Bitcoin and overthrowing, anything?
More than you might think.
Okay, you've got me hooked on this responsibility thing, but what's the connection to Bitcoin? It's not like there's a morality button on my hardware wallet.
Right. It's more subtle, more about the system that it kind of creates,
Yeah.
Think back to those early farmers we were talking about.
Okay.
If they'd had Bitcoin, their relationship to power, to the state, it would have been fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And that self-sovereignty, it kind of spills over, It's not just about the money.
So by taking control of your own finances, you're more likely to then take control of other aspects of your life.
Exactly.
Your values, your choices.
Yeah, and that's actually where this whole idea of moral practice comes in. Borders doesn't just want us to just understand this stuff intellectually. He wants us to live it.
Moral practice, huh?
Yeah.
So not just reading philosophy books, but actually putting it into practice. What does that even mean?
Exactly. It's like any other skill, really. You don't get good at playing piano just by thinking about it. You gotta practice,
Right.
You gotta hit those wrong notes and try again.
Sure.
Same with moral development. It's a practice.
Okay. I'm all for self-improvement, but this sounds a bit vague.
Sure.
Give me a concrete example. What does moral practice look like in daily life?
Sure. So it starts with awareness, right? So think about a time you got frustrated with someone, maybe someone cut you off in traffic.
Happens all the time.
Right. So the moral practice is catching that initial anger, and just asking yourself, what's really going on here?
So instead of just reacting, you take a beat to examine your own emotions.
Yeah.
Your own biases, right?
Exactly. Maybe the other driver's having a terrible day.
Yeah.
Or, maybe you're stressed about something completely unrelated. That pause, that self-reflection, that is the practice. It's about recognizing that our actions, even our thoughts, they have ripples, even in something as, seemingly small as a traffic encounter.
And how does this tie back into the whole church of state idea, those luxury beliefs you mentioned?
It's a great question. It's so easy to fall into the trap of I'm a good person because I hold these beliefs, right?
Right.
But what if those beliefs are more about signaling virtue than actually, moderating ethical behavior?
So it's like wearing the right T-shirt without actually doing the work of volunteering at a soup kitchen or something.
Yeah. It's easier to signal your beliefs than to consistently act on them, right?
Right. For sure.
Yeah, and this is where I think self-deception can really creep in. We can convince ourselves that we're morally superior because of, the ideas we hold, the groups we align with. But true moral growth requires more than that.
Okay, so what is it then?
It requires examining those beliefs, seeing if they actually translate into compassionate ethical action in the real world.
And if they don't, what then? Do we just throw out our beliefs and start over?
Not necessarily. It's about being open to that self-reflection, to that constant kind of course correction.
Okay.
Maybe a certain belief isn't serving you, or worse, it's blinding you to your own biases, your own capacity for, that's part of the practice too, that willingness to evolve.
So it's less about being right and more about constantly striving to be better.
Exactly, yeah. And recognizing that we all make mistakes, we're all works in progress. But by taking responsibility for our own moral development, by engaging in that ongoing practice, we become more conscious, more compassionate, and ultimately more free.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together, but
Yeah.
How do we actually make this happen on a larger scale, right?
Right.
One person reflecting on their road rage isn't exactly a revolution.
That's where things get really interesting. Borders argues that this individual transformation, this commitment to moral practice, is actually the seed of something much larger. It's the foundation of a more just, a more equitable society.
Okay.
And remember that $25,000 Constitution of Consent contest we...
Oh, right. The challenge to, design a new system from the ground up.
Exactly.
So it's taking those individual practices and building them into the very fabric of society.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Imagine a constitution that's not just about, protecting individual rights, but about encouraging individual responsibility. One that incentivizes things like moral development, transparency, voluntary cooperation. That's the kind of radical shift Borders is talking about.
So it's not just about rewriting laws. It's about rewriting the rules of the game entirely.
Yes.
Creating a system where those values are just baked in from the start.
Yeah. Exactly. And while the idea of rewriting the Constitution might seem kind of daunting,
Yeah.
Borders argues that we can start small. We can build those principles of consent, voluntary interaction, and personal responsibility into our daily lives, our communities, the technologies we use.
So it's about those small conscious choices, those daily practices adding up to something much bigger.
Yes.
It's like Bitcoin, right? one transaction at a time.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive bystanders in this grand experiment we call society, right?
Right.
We are the architects. And with each choice we make, we're either reinforcing those old systems or we're building something new.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. But for those of us who aren't quite ready to rewrite the Constitution, what's a good first step? Like, how do we start putting these ideas into practice in our own lives?
That's a fantastic question, and one that I think will resonate with a lot of listeners. It all comes down to, like we were saying, awareness and action.
Okay, so we're building a better world, one conscious choice at a time. Where do we start?
Well, I think it starts with those moral practice moments we talked about, next time you catch yourself getting all swept up in outrage or, judging someone harshly, hit pause. That's your cue right there.
To do what? Like meditate on a mountaintop?
No. Keep it simple. Just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now?
Okay.
What assumptions am I making about this person or this situation? Are those assumptions actually kind? Are they fair?
So it's about bringing that self-awareness into those everyday interactions, those little moments where we often just operate on autopilot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And don't beat yourself up if you don't always get it right. This isn't about moral perfection.
Yeah.
It's about practice. Each time you catch yourself, you're building that muscle, building that awareness.
And what about those luxury beliefs? How do I know if I'm clinging to something that's more about ego than actual ethics?
That's a good question. Ask yourself this. Does this belief actually make me more compassionate in my actions? Or is it just a way to feel superior without requiring me to actually do the work?
Ouch, that's a tough one. But so important. It's so easy to hide behind our beliefs, to use them as shields instead of mirrors. You know?
Yeah, totally. And that's where the real growth happens, when we're willing to see ourselves honestly, even the uncomfortable parts. And that honesty, it's contagious. It ripples out.
So by doing this inner work, we're not just improving ourselves, we're subtly shifting the whole dynamic around us.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Like Border says, we create a constitution of consent, not just through these grand gestures, but through millions of these tiny acts of courage, compassion, and responsibility.
So those everyday choices that we make, they really do matter.
They do, yeah, because they're not just shaping our own lives, right? They're shaping the world.
Okay, I'm feeling ready to ditch autopilot and get to work. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just this. Don't underestimate the power of your own choices. And, don't be afraid to experiment, to challenge the status quo, to imagine a world where consent, not coercion, is the foundation of human interaction.
Because a better world starts with each of us. And if you're looking for inspiration for some practical tools to actually build that better world, well, we've got you covered.
That's right. Check out Max Border's work, including that incredible Constitution of Consent contest we mentioned. Head over to underthrow.org. You might just walk away with $25,000 in a blueprint for a brighter future.
And even if you don't win the grand prize, just engaging with these ideas is a win in itself. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep building that brighter future, one conscious choice at a time.
Until next time.